My name is Jessica. My parents bought my younger sister a $300,000 apartment, but told me they had nothing left for my college fund. I was the one who stayed up late studying, who dreamed of UC Berkeley. That night, in the silence of my childhood bedroom, I realized they never planned to choose me, but I would choose myself. Before I begin, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. This story might just hit home. I was home for the summer in Sacramento, sitting on the edge of our living room couch when I heard it, casual, offhand, like it wasn't going to burn straight through me. "We signed the closing papers this morning," my dad said, chuckling over his coffee. "Emily's place has a view of the river, can you believe that?" Emily, my 17-year-old sister, who hadn't yet graduated high school, who switched hobbies every 2 weeks and had just told me she might get into interior design. She was getting her own apartment. "I thought you were saving for Jessica's college," my aunt asked gently, her voice barely audible over the hum of polite conversation. Mom didn't miss a beat. "Well, yes, we were, but the apartment opportunity came up and Emily needs stability right now. Plus, Jessica's always been so resourceful." My heart gave a strange thud. Resourceful? "Wait," I said, sitting forward. "So what about my tuition?" A beat of silence. My mother glanced at my father, then back at me. She even smiled like I was being silly. "Oh, honey," she said, "there's nothing left in that account now, but you're strong, Jess, you'll figure it out." I stared at them, both of them, my parents. The people who had cheered at every science fair ribbon and told me I was meant for more. I'd been accepted to UC Berkeley. I had cried when I got the letter, clutched it to my chest like a lifeline. The first in our family to make it that far. And they knew. They knew how much it meant. Emily, who had been scrolling on her phone on the armchair beside me, didn't even look up. "You'll be fine," she muttered. "You always are." That stung more than I care to admit. I always am. Like my consistency, my hard work, my quiet ambition were things to be punished. I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. I stood up slowly, walking out of the living room like I wasn't about to fall apart. My mother called after me once, but it was half-hearted. In my childhood bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it. The silence was loud. Too loud. I thought about the mornings I'd gotten up before sunrise to help clean the bakery downtown so I could earn a few extra dollars. The nights I'd stayed up with flashcards, poring over biology notes. The scholarships I'd applied for. The dreams I whispered to myself on the school bus. And just like that, they were gone. Or maybe they were never real to them to begin with. I curled into my bed, pulled the blanket over my head, and let the tears fall. My chest hurt in that kind of way that doesn't come from heartbreak, but from betrayal. Deeper, colder, quieter. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. That would come later. Right then, I just wanted to disappear, be nowhere, be no one, but I knew I couldn't. I'd have to become someone instead. Someone else. Someone who didn't need them. By morning, something in me had hardened. Not like steel, no, that would have been too glamorous. More like stone. Cold, immovable, chipped from something that used to be soft. I didn't wait for breakfast. Didn't look for my parents. I wrote a short note on a sticky pad and left it on the fridge. "Going to figure it out, like you said." That was it. No goodbye, no explanation, no drama. Just the clarity of someone whose heart had cracked open and decided, calmly, to build something new from the rubble. Modesto was an hour away, and the bus ride felt longer than it was. The driver didn't ask why I clutched a duffel bag like it held everything I had left. Maybe she'd seen too many girls like me to wonder anymore. I'd found the room on a local classifieds site. Tiny, cramped, and overpriced. Wedged above a bakery with just enough space for a mattress, a desk, and dreams if you folded them small enough. The landlady, Mrs. Ramos, barely looked up from her crossword when I arrived. She handed me the key and said, "No loud music, no candles, rent on the first." Then added, almost like an afterthought, "And the smell from downstairs, you get used to it." I never did. But the scent of warm sourdough and cinnamon clung to everything I owned, and somehow it made me feel less alone. That night, I unpacked the only photo I brought with me, one of me at the state science fair holding my first-place medal. My dad had taken it. He was proud then. Or at least he pretended well. I stuck it to the wall with tape, right above the desk I'd picked up for free from the curb. And I whispered, "They gave me nothing, I'll make everything." That became my mantra, my mission, my madness. I spent days buried in prep books I found at the library, sketching out study schedules like they were battle plans. I couldn't afford classes, but I could afford determination and caffeine. Mostly caffeine. That's where I first noticed him. Alex. He sat 2 rows over, headphones in, scribbling notes with the kind of focus that made me curious. We'd made accidental eye contact once, and he smiled. Just enough to seem polite, not enough to mean anything. I didn't come here for friends, I reminded myself, or boys, or small talk. I came to pass, to win, to prove. But the next day, as I flipped through the same biology chapter for the 3rd time, trying to force ATP synthesis into my brain, he slid into the seat across from me. "You always study this hard?" he asked, resting his chin on one hand. I blinked at him. "Isn't that the point?" He smiled, not amused, not smug, just understanding. "Depends. Some people study to remember, some study to forget." I didn't reply, didn't owe him that truth. Instead, I shrugged and said, "I need this more than most." He nodded like he already knew. "I'm Alex. Jessica." And just like that, he didn't leave. He didn't push, either. He didn't ask what I meant. He just pulled out a highlighter and opened his book beside mine. "Photosynthesis is weird," he muttered. I laughed quietly. It startled me. When I left the library that night, something inside me felt a little less cold. Not warm, not yet, but flickering. I didn't expect to see Alex again. But 3 days later, he appeared in the biology aisle just as I reached for a weathered copy of Campbell's Biology. His hand brushed mine. "You again?" I raised an eyebrow. "You stalking my mitochondria?" He grinned. "Maybe I'm just chasing cellular respiration." I rolled my eyes, but the corner of my mouth tugged up. Maybe it was the way he didn't flinch at my sarcasm. Or maybe it was just nice to be noticed, not for what I'd lost, but for how hard I was trying. After that, it became a rhythm. We'd run into each other in quiet library corners or end up side by side at the cafe that offered student discounts on bitter coffee and stale muffins. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't, but the silence was never awkward. One rainy Tuesday, we claimed a booth at the back of the cafe, notebooks open, highlighters scattered like confetti between us. Outside, thunder murmured. Inside, my nerves simmered. I hadn't told anyone my story, not really. But when Alex asked, "What brought you to Modesto?" it didn't feel like an interrogation, just curiosity wrapped in kindness. I hesitated, then said, "I was supposed to go to Berkeley." "Supposed to?" "My parents, they used the money." My throat tightened, but I pushed through. "Bought my sister an apartment, told me they didn't have anything left." He leaned back slowly, absorbing the words without interrupting. Wow, I'm sorry." "I'm not," I said, maybe too quickly. "They showed me exactly where I stand, now I don't have to wonder." Alex didn't try to comfort me with cliches. He didn't say, "They probably meant well," or "Family's complicated." He just nodded like he understood. "You're still aiming for Berkeley?" he asked after a pause. "Yeah, even if I have to claw my way there." A slow smile spread across his face. "You've got more fire than anyone I know." I looked away, pretending to focus on my essay outline, but inside something cracked just a little. It wasn't a grand, romantic moment. There were no violins, no fluttering hearts, just recognition. Someone seeing me, not as the girl left behind, but as the woman still moving forward. We fell into a routine. Mondays and Wednesdays, the library. Thursdays, cafe. Saturdays, we'd both end up in the park with our notebooks when the weather allowed. I never asked if it was planned. It just happened. He shared bits of his life slowly. Like me, he wasn't exactly overflowing with family warmth. His dad was distant, his mom worn thin from trying to be everything at once. "I study," he once said, "because it's the one thing no one can take away." I understood that too well. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me as I recited biology flashcards or sketched diagrams. Not in a creepy way, more like curiosity, like he was studying me the same way I was studying for entrance exams. Carefully, thoroughly. "Do you ever stop?" he asked one night, gesturing to my open textbook. I shrugged. "If I stop, I think. And if you think..." I didn't answer. Instead, I said, "Thinking's a luxury I can't afford, not right now." He didn't press. Just slid a cup of lukewarm coffee toward me. We kept meeting. We kept talking. And bit by bit, the girl who left home with only a duffel bag and a cracked heart started to feel something strange. Hope. The days leading up to the entrance exams were a blur of caffeine, highlighters, and nerves that crawled under my skin like ants. Alex was a constant. Our study sessions had grown tighter, more focused. He started testing me with flashcards at random moments. "Glycolysis," he'd ask, handing me a muffin like it was a reward. "2 ATP in, 4 out," I'd say, mouth full, and we'd both grin like kids getting away with something. He made it easier. Not easy, but bearable. And for the first time in months, I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, I had a shot. Maybe UC Berkeley wasn't a lost dream, just a delayed one. When exam day came, I wore my best thrifted blazer and brought 2 sharpened pencils and a quiet prayer. The testing hall buzzed with tension. I found Alex 2 rows over, and he gave me a nod, subtle, steadying. "Show them," his eyes said. So I did. I left the building shaky but proud, clutching my test ticket like it meant something sacred. We celebrated at our usual cafe with burnt toast and watery coffee. He raised his cup in mock ceremony. "To the future doctor of something science-y," he toasted. "Biological sciences," I corrected, laughing. "With a possible concentration in ecology," he smiled. "Doctor of dirt and photosynthesis, I like it." I felt light that day, lighter than I had in years. For 2 weeks, I floated. I started drafting a vision board on my wall, scraps from seed catalogs and scientific journals, bits of paper where I'd written phrases like research farm, food justice, and make something beautiful that feeds people. I didn't show anyone, not even Alex, but I taped it above my bed like a secret promise to myself. The day results came out, I checked the list on the library terminal. Alex stood beside me, arms crossed, trying to look casual. My fingers trembled as I typed in my registration number, and then I stared. My name wasn't there. I blinked, refreshed the page. Still nothing, nothing. My breath caught, the room spun. The silence behind my eyes was deafening. Alex leaned over. "Try again." I did, still nothing. I pulled back from the screen and stepped away like it had slapped me. I didn't get in," I whispered. Alex looked, then double-checked, then looked at me. "Are you sure this is the right list?" he asked gently. I nodded. "It's the supplemental admits list. I'm not even waitlisted." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the library computers filled the space between us. "I'm sorry, Jess," he said finally. I nodded again, mute. But inside, something collapsed. All those nights, all those silent sacrifices, all that effort, and for what? "I need some air," I said, backing away. He followed me out. We walked in silence for 3 blocks until I couldn't hold it anymore. "I gave up everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My family, my home, my future. I thought this was the one thing I could control." "You still can," Alex said quietly. "No, I can't," I snapped. "Berkeley was my plan, my only plan. I have no money, no backup, no one to catch me if I fall." "You have me," he interrupted, voice firm. I froze. He reached into his bag and pulled out a bundle of textbooks, biology, chemistry, statistics. All worn, annotated, loved. "I brought these for you," he said. "If college won't take you, we'll make our own classroom." My throat closed. He laid the books out on the cafe table like sacred offerings. "I'll tutor you, you teach me back. We'll build it brick by brick. You don't need their permission to become who you're meant to be." I stared at him, this boy who had no obligation to care, who had no reason to believe in me and yet did. Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Why?" I asked. "Because," he said with a half-smile, "you have more fire than anyone I know." That night, back in my tiny room above the bakery, I flipped open one of the books and traced the margin notes with my fingers. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I'd failed. I felt like I was just beginning again. The textbooks Alex gave me didn't just sit on my desk, they lived there. Open, dog-eared, scribbled on. I studied like it was still for Berkeley, because in my mind it still was. Even if the door had closed, I hadn't stopped knocking. But I needed more than studying. I needed money. So I took a job at a little organic food store tucked between a laundromat and a dry cleaner, run by a woman named Moira who wore overalls and always smelled like rosemary. "We don't pay much," she warned during my interview, "but we believe in things that grow." That was enough. I spent mornings arranging heirloom tomatoes and evenings wiping down shelves. Customers came in asking about local soil pH, organic pest control, composting, and slowly I realized I could answer them. Not just with memorized facts, but with understanding. "You should talk to the garden group," Maura said one day. "They meet behind the community center every Sunday. Most of them don't know the first thing about biology." So I did, nervously at first, clutching my notepad like a shield. But they welcomed me, retired school teachers, young parents with toddlers, people growing beans in paint buckets and lettuce in baby pools. "Are you a teacher?" one woman asked as I explained root nodules and nitrogen fixation. I hesitated. "Not yet, just figuring it out." Word spread. I started getting calls. "Hi, Jess, Maura said you know plants. I'm trying to grow basil, but it keeps dying. Help. My strawberries look sad. Is that normal?" It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay. But every time I helped someone make something thrive, it stitched something back together in me. Meanwhile, Alex kept showing up. After his classes, during his breaks, late at night with coffee and new note cards. We didn't label what we were. There was no need. On Thursdays, he'd walk me home from the store, our shadows stretching long under the streetlights. He talked about wanting to teach one day. I talked about soil health like it was poetry. One night, we sat on my floor surrounded by seed packets and spilled potting mix. He was outlining a DIY greenhouse plan in a spiral notebook, and I was repotting a droopy cilantro plant. "It feels like we're building something," he said suddenly. I glanced up. "We are," I said quietly, "even if we don't know what it is yet." He reached over, brushed a smear of dirt from my cheek. "Then let's keep building." I smiled, but part of me still held back, because some wounds don't vanish. They just get quieter. Sometimes I'd lie awake wondering if I was delusional, running toward a dream that didn't want me, betting on a version of myself that my own family didn't believe in. But every time I wanted to give up, I'd get another text. "Hey, are aphids supposed to fly? Jess, is it bad if my tomatoes have black bottoms? Do you do garden consults? I can pay in pie." And I'd remember, even without the degree, people saw value in what I knew, in who I was becoming. Alex's parents invited me to dinner one weekend. I almost said no. I wasn't ready to be vulnerable in front of anyone else's family, but he nudged me gently. "They're not your parents," he said. "Just people, good ones." He was right. They welcomed me with warm soup and stories, asked about my ideas without condescension, and didn't once mention what I didn't have. "You've got vision," his dad said, passing the bread. "We believe in people like you." That night, walking home under a full moon, I turned to Alex and said, "I think your parents are better than mine." He looked at me seriously. "They'd say the same about you." I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Instead, I whispered, "Thank you." Not just for dinner, for seeing me, for choosing me, for making this broken, makeshift life feel, if only briefly, like a beginning. By spring, my tiny room above the bakery looked more like a science experiment than a living space. Pots lined every windowsill. Egg cartons grew baby herbs. Recycled yogurt containers held experimental lettuces. A borrowed grow lamp buzzed softly in the corner. I'd started calling it the farm, half joking, but it was the only word that made the mess feel sacred instead of chaotic. Most nights, I stayed up late on my laptop, researching crop rotation, microgreens, compost chemistry. I devoured articles like they were survival guides. Alex teased me once, holding up a sticky note I'd stuck to his forehead that read leafy greens equals fast growers. "Jess," he said, grinning, "are you planning a takeover?" "Just a tiny one," I said. "One basil sprout at a time." And I wasn't kidding. I'd opened a small online shop, Jessica's Greens, nothing fancy. A few bundles of herbs, starter kits, beginner compost packs. I posted blurry photos and wrote hopeful descriptions. Locally grown, biologically honest, cared for with calloused hands and caffeine-fueled dreams. The orders trickled in. A cafe bought 2 boxes of fresh mint. A neighbor asked for 3 rosemary plants and left a note. "My wife has cancer, thank you for reminding her things still grow." I cried over that one, quietly, while transplanting basil into mason jars. I wasn't making money. Not really. Most weeks I broke even or lost a few bucks after packaging and soil. But something about the exchange, the giving, the planting, the hope, felt like repayment for the years I'd been denied. Still, not everything thrived. One week, every kale sprout turned yellow and wilted. Another time, my compost brewed too hot and killed the earthworms. I paced my room, muttering to myself, rewriting fertilizer ratios like it would fix the fear rising in my chest. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was just surviving, not building. When I mentioned shutting it down to Alex, he didn't say anything at first. Just listened, sitting cross-legged on my floor while I vented into a half-dead spinach plant. Finally, he said, "You know it's okay to fail, as long as it's honest." I didn't want to hear that. I wanted a fix, a miracle. But he handed me a bag of chocolate almonds instead and added, "You're not doing this for applause. You're doing it because you believe in it." That helped, not instantly, but enough. The next day, Alex's parents invited me over again. I assumed it was another dinner, but when I arrived, they led me to the backyard. "You mentioned needing more space," his dad said, gesturing to a raised bed frame. "Thought we'd offer you this. Grow whatever you want." I blinked. "Really?" His mom smiled. "You've got vision, and we believe in people like you." Those words hit me in the chest, harder than I expected. I spent the afternoon filling the soil with trembling hands and cautious gratitude. As I planted rows of arugula and green onions, I realized something. My life wasn't where I thought it'd be. I wasn't at Berkeley. I wasn't the daughter anyone bragged about. But I was making something real, rooted, my own. The day I moved in with Alex felt nothing like the dramatic life milestone I'd imagined growing up. There were no champagne toasts or ribbon-cutting photos for social media. Just two worn-out people lugging mismatched furniture up a narrow staircase, laughing when the bookshelf got stuck halfway. "This thing's cursed," Alex muttered, balancing one end against his hip. "You sure you want to bring it?" "It held my seed starters," I said, grinning. "It stays, it's seen things." When we finally collapsed onto the mattress, still on the floor, Alex looked over and whispered, "Welcome home." I didn't cry, not then. It wasn't until later, when I unpacked a chipped ceramic pot and found a faded label that read "Time Heals," that it hit me. This was mine. A place I wasn't borrowing or renting by the week. A life that wasn't makeshift or temporary. Ours. Alex's apartment wasn't fancy. It had peeling paint, unpredictable plumbing, and a weird smell in the hallway we never figured out. But inside, we carved out a rhythm that felt like peace. Mornings, I'd brew bitter coffee while he read his lecture notes aloud, half distracted by me repotting parsley in old mugs. Afternoons, he'd stop by my soil bed at his parents' place, kneeling to check moisture levels while pretending not to sneak cherry tomatoes off the vine. Evenings, we took turns making dinner, usually simple things: rice and lentils, roasted squash, pasta with herbs I grew in tin cans. He always insisted on lighting a candle, even if we were eating grilled cheese. "Dignity," he'd say with mock seriousness, waving the lighter. "Every meal deserves ambience." I started sleeping better, worrying less, smiling more. I kept studying too. My notebooks grew thick with soil formulas, growth charts, compost logs. I applied for small sustainability grants, entered local contests, pitched my tiny shop at a pop-up market. Most people passed me by, but a cafe downtown placed a standing order for microgreens. A yoga studio asked for lavender sachets and aloe cuttings. Then one afternoon, Maura, the woman from the organic store where I still worked part-time, stopped by my little booth. "You've built something," she said, eyeing my hand-lettered sign, "Jessica's Greens, Honest Plants, grown with love and grit." "It's barely holding together," I admitted, laughing. "Exactly," she said. "That's how you know it's real." Later that week, I rented a small greenhouse space from a local retired farmer named Dale who'd seen my flyer on the community board. "You're scrappy," he said, unlocking the gate. "Remind me of my wife when she first started. You want it, you'll make it happen." I walked into the empty greenhouse, the glass panes smudged and sun-warmed, the soil patch cracked but promising. It felt like standing inside a dream I hadn't dared speak aloud. That night, I lay beside Alex, tracing the outline of his hand. "I've never had this kind of peace," I whispered. He kissed my forehead. "That's because you earned it." And I had, not through luck, not through inheritance or handouts, but through grit, failure, sweat, love, and something else I hadn't named yet. Maybe it was faith, in myself. in what could grow if given even a sliver of light. The first sign something was wrong came in the form of silence. No birdsong outside the greenhouse. No distant buzz of bees around the wildflowers I'd planted along the back fence. Just stillness and heat, oppressive, all-consuming heat. Inside the greenhouse, the thermometer mocked me, 108 degrees. The fans I'd installed were struggling, rattling like overworked lungs. The soil was dry even after double watering. My lettuces had collapsed. The basil was brown at the edges. The air smelled like burned mint and loss. I stood in the middle of it all, sweat pouring down my back, heart thudding like it was trying to warn me. You're losing this. By evening, I'd pulled 3 entire trays of microgreens. Dead, unusable. At home, I dumped them into the compost bin with trembling hands and walked straight into the shower, fully clothed. I didn't turn on the water, just stood there in the dark, the smell of rot clinging to my clothes. Alex knocked once before pushing open the bathroom door. "Hey," he said gently. "You didn't come to dinner." "I'm not hungry." He stepped closer. "Jess, I can't fix it." My voice cracked. "I tried everything. It's not enough." He didn't speak, just crouched beside the tub, resting his chin on the edge like we were kids hiding from a thunderstorm. "I worked so hard," I whispered. "Months of this, building something real, believing I could actually matter without a degree or a name or family support, and now it's melting." He reached up, lacing his fingers through mine. "You matter, this isn't the end." I pulled my hand away. "You don't get it, Alex. If this fails, I don't get another shot. There's no savings account, no fallback, just this, just me, and I'm not enough." It was the first time I saw pain cross his face in response to my words, not because he disagreed, but because it hurt him to hear me believe them. He stood, left without a word. And for a moment I thought, good, let him leave, I'm a sinking ship. But 20 minutes later I heard something, a car, then another, doors slamming, voices. I stepped onto the balcony and froze. Alex had returned with his parents, with Dale the farmer, with Moira from the store. They were hauling supplies, fans, bags of mulch, gallons of water, even 2 tubs of ice. What is this?" I asked as I ran down the stairs. Alex looked up at me, sweaty and out of breath. "We're saving your greenhouse." I wanted to argue, to tell them it was too late. But then his mother handed me a towel and said, "We believe in you, Jessica. Now shut up and tell us where to start." They worked for hours. We opened every vent and door, turned the fans to full blast, soaked every surviving bed. We lined trays with wet cloth for evaporative cooling. Alex placed the ice in buckets around the room, trying to bring down the ambient heat. Even Dale, who walked with a cane, stayed until the sun dipped below the trees. When we finally stopped, the greenhouse wasn't cool. But it wasn't boiling either. We had lost a lot. Half the beds. Most of the herbs, but not all. I stood there, surrounded by dirt and wilting leaves and friends I hadn't realized I'd made, and something inside me shifted. This wasn't just a greenhouse, it was a mirror. It showed me what I had built, not just crops, but community. Alex handed me a thermos of warm lemonade and said, "Still think you're not enough?" I took a sip, bitter, sweet. "I was so close to quitting," I admitted. He smiled softly. "Then we were close to losing something beautiful." I looked around, at the flickering fan, the patched shade cloth, the half-dead basil that still smelled like summer. Failure hadn't destroyed me, and that had to count for something. Recovery wasn't dramatic, it wasn't fast, and it didn't come with applause. It was early mornings with dirt under my nails and late nights crunching numbers that still didn't make sense. It was sitting in front of my laptop, rewarding listings on my online shop until they didn't sound like desperation. But slowly, inch by inch, things returned. The kale sprouted again, tentative and fragile. My rosemary, which I'd half buried in shade and prayers, sent out new shoots. A batch of mint bounced back with such enthusiasm it made me laugh out loud. Sales trickled in, this time with cautious comments. "Plants came in healthy, thank you. Appreciate the care instructions, didn't expect that. Your greens survived the hottest week of the year, respect." Respect, not sympathy, not pity. Respect. It settled deep in my chest, quiet and grounding. Alex built me a simple wooden sign for the greenhouse, burned my name into the grain with a soldering iron. Jessica's Greens, just that, nothing more. And somehow it said everything. I started experimenting again, not just with plants, but with people. I offered weekend eco-workshops at the community center. Simple stuff at first: composting basics, how to grow herbs in small spaces, building pollinator gardens in old milk crates. I figured no one would show up, but they did. One woman came dragging her skeptical teenage son. A retired couple arrived with matching notebooks. A single dad asked if he could bring his daughter just to see something grow. They asked questions. They took notes. They listened. I'd never felt more terrified or more alive. "Teaching looks good on you," Alex said one night, thumbing through my scribbled lesson plans. "I'm just talking about dirt." He shook his head. "You're showing people how to make something beautiful with what they have. That's not just dirt, that's power." Maybe he was right, because a month later, someone from the local Green Business Alliance came to my Sunday workshop. A quiet woman with a clipboard who introduced herself as Shay. She didn't say much, just watched. 2 weeks later, I got an email. I'd been nominated to speak at their regional seminar. "I'm not qualified," I told Alex, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're building a food system out of a garden hose and optimism," he said. "You're more than qualified." The seminar wasn't huge, maybe 40 people in folding chairs. But when I stepped on stage, palms sweating, breath shallow, something happened. I looked into the crowd and saw gardeners and teachers and parents and a few teenagers fiddling with pens. People like me. And I spoke. Not just about plants or photosynthesis, but about what it meant to build something after being told you weren't worth investing in. I told them about losing my college fund, about renting a room above a bakery, about failing and trying and failing again. I told them that growth isn't always vertical. Sometimes it crawls sideways, invisible, until it breaks through the surface. I ended with this: you don't have to be chosen by someone else to start. You can choose yourself. You can grow anyway. There was silence at first. Then someone clapped, then more. And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. That night, Shay approached me after the seminar with a small envelope. "It's not much," she said, handing it to me, "but our committee believes in projects like yours, real ones, the ones that grow from the ground up." It was a check, enough to upgrade my irrigation system and finally replace the cracked greenhouse door. Alex's parents took us out for dinner to celebrate. We sat in a dim little restaurant with mismatched chairs and paper menus and toasted with sparkling cider. At one point, his mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You made us believe we could still do something that matters," she said. "You did that." I couldn't speak, just smiled, tears welling in my eyes, full of a gratitude I couldn't begin to name. On the walk home, Alex slipped his arm around me. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked. "What?" "That hum in your chest. That thing that tells you you didn't just survive, you're building something permanent." I stopped walking, looked up at him under the streetlight, soft gold on his face. "I used to think I was just the girl who got left out," I whispered. "Now I think maybe I was the girl who had to leave to find her voice." He leaned in close. "And now I think I'm just getting started." I always thought life-altering news came with thunder. A cinematic gasp. Some dramatic swell of music in the background. But mine arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Birds chirping, sunlight leaking across the hardwood. A toothbrush balanced in my mouth while I read the little plus sign on a stick. I stared at it for 5 minutes, unmoving. Then I sat down, hard on the edge of the tub. "Pregnant." I said it out loud. Twice. It didn't sound real. Pregnant. Not someday, not in theory, not when we're ready. Now. I stared at the tiny plastic stick like it had cursed me and blessed me all at once. My hands shook. My stomach turned. My brain spun in every direction except the one I needed. Calm. This wasn't the plan. We weren't married. We were barely stable. I had a greenhouse that still needed repairs, an online shop that sometimes made money and sometimes didn't, and parents who hadn't called in over a year. And yet, somewhere underneath the chaos, there was something warm. Not quite joy, not yet, but possibility. I didn't tell Alex right away, not out of fear, out of reverence. This was a moment that needed the right kind of air, the kind that felt sacred. So I waited until evening. He was sitting on the couch, thumbing through a book on sustainable farming. His feet were propped on the coffee table, and he was wearing the same faded t-shirt he'd worn the day we met. Photosynthesis is magic. I sat beside him, took his hand, placed it on my stomach, and said quietly, "I think we're building something bigger than we planned." He froze. His eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. "Jess, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed stretched long enough for me to feel the edge of panic. But then, without a word, he set the book down, pulled me into his arms, and held me like he'd known all along. Like his body had been waiting for this shift before his mind could catch up. He leaned back, searching my face. "How do you feel?" "Scared, grateful, a little nauseous." He laughed softly. "Sounds like love." Then he stood, walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a tiny silver ring, thin, simple, probably bought on a whim, and returned, kneeling not with fanfare, but with the calm certainty he always carried. "I was waiting for the right moment," he said. "Turns out it's now." I blinked, stunned. "This isn't how I pictured it," I whispered. He smiled. "Nothing about us has been how we pictured it. But it's been better, hasn't it?" I nodded, tears already sliding down my cheeks. "Yes," I said. "Better." We didn't throw a party, didn't post it online. We married quietly, just us, his parents, and a small garden blooming behind their house. I wore a cotton dress with dirt under my nails. He wore the same smile I'd fallen in love with during study breaks and late-night walks. His father officiated, voice trembling only once when he called me, the daughter we didn't know we needed. We said vows under the oak tree where I'd once cried after the heat wave, surrounded by herbs and bees and people who had chosen me without blood or obligation. Afterward, we bought a modest home on the edge of town. White paint, a creaky porch swing, and a yard big enough for raised beds and dreams. It wasn't perfect. It needed work. But when I stood in that garden and pressed my hand to my growing belly, I felt something powerful. I wasn't just planting for me anymore. I was building a life for someone who would grow up knowing that being overlooked doesn't mean being unworthy. That sometimes the ones left out are the ones who rise the highest. Alex came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm more than okay." We stood there in silence, listening to the wind rustle the baby arugula. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I just felt home. It started with a knock, not a timid one, not the kind that waits to be invited in. This knock was sharp, impatient, like whoever was on the other side believed they already belonged. I wiped my hands on my apron, heart thudding louder than it had in months. I wasn't expecting anyone. Alex was at the farmer's market. His parents were out of town, and I wasn't due for any deliveries. The knock came again. I opened the door, and there she was, Emily, my sister. Same polished hair, same designer sunglasses perched perfectly on her head like she was headed to brunch in Beverly Hills. But her eyes, those had changed. They darted past me into the house like she was searching for something she couldn't name. "This is yours," she asked, voice half whisper, half accusation. I didn't answer. She stepped onto the porch without waiting. Her heels clicked against the wood like punctuation. I could smell her perfume, something expensive, sharp, too sweet. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the yard, the greenhouse, the rows of kale, the lavender climbing up the trellis, the handmade swing with sun-bleached ropes, the herbs growing in mismatched teacups by the steps. "This is wow," she said finally. I crossed my arms. "Why are you here, Emily?" She didn't answer me directly, just pulled out her phone and whispered into it, "Dad, you have to see this. Right now, I'm not kidding." My stomach dropped. Before I could react, a black SUV pulled up along the curb. My father stepped out. Same suit, same stern face, but slower now, grayer. And behind him, my mother, eyes hidden behind tinted lenses, her expression unreadable. It felt like a hallucination. I hadn't seen them in 3 years. Not since the night they told me there was nothing left for my education because Emily needed an apartment in San Diego. Not since they said I was strong, and that strong girls figure it out. And now here they were on my porch, looking around like they'd just discovered a lost city. "Jessica," my father said, trailing off as he looked at the house behind me. I didn't move, I didn't speak. He stepped closer, swallowing hard. "Is this really yours?" I nodded once. "And the garden?" I nodded again. Then I stepped aside so they could see the porch swing. A tiny pair of pink booties sat there, ones I'd crocheted during my second trimester. My mother gasped softly. My father blinked like the sun had just hit him in the face. "You're pregnant," he said, Not a question, just a stunned observation. 8 months, I replied, voice steady. Married, happy, busy, you know everything you assumed I'd never be without your help. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Emily, still standing off to the side, whispered, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked at her. "You weren't listening," I said. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my father sank down onto the porch steps like he couldn't carry the weight of what he was seeing. "We were wrong," he said. "Jess, we thought you'd struggle. We thought without us." "I did struggle," I interrupted. "But not in the way you think. I didn't need your money, I needed your belief. And when that didn't come, I found people who gave it freely." Alex's car pulled into the driveway then. He stepped out, smiled when he saw me, but paused when he noticed the visitors. He came to my side, wrapping his arm around me without hesitation. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "You too." "Married," I said simply. My father looked up at Alex, eyes glinting. You're the one who helped her, loved her, stood by her while she built a life from scratch," Alex offered, polite but firm. "Yeah, that was me." My father lowered his gaze. The silence was heavier now, but different, less defensive, more ashamed. "We should have supported you," he murmured. "Not because you needed it, but because you deserved it." I looked at my parents, finally seeing them clearly without longing or bitterness or hunger for approval. Just people, flawed, late, regretful. I reached for Alex's hand and held it tightly. "I didn't get here in spite of you," I said. "I got here because I learned to live without needing your permission to succeed." My mother stepped forward, her voice soft. "Can we try again?" I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. Because power, I realized, didn't come from shutting people out. It came from knowing you could let them in and still keep your boundaries intact. Alex turned to me, his hand resting gently over mine. "You okay?" he asked. I looked at the garden, the house, the life I had grown from rejection and resilience. "I'm more than okay," I said, and I meant it. They started coming by on Sundays, at first just Emily. She'd bring her daughter, Madeline, 4 years old, curious and chatty, with wide brown eyes that reminded me of our grandmother. She'd skip around the garden beds asking questions like, "Why do carrots live underground? And can flowers talk?" Emily would stand back, quiet, letting me lead. She didn't apologize in words. Not exactly. But she watered plants when I needed help, pulled weeds without being asked, and once left a note on my kitchen table that simply said, "You were right." I kept it. Then my parents started visiting, too. Hesitant at first, hovering at the edge of the yard like trespassers in a memory. They never came unannounced, never brought gifts or advice, just themselves, and questions. "Could we help set up the booth for the workshop? Do you need chairs moved? Would it be all right if we stayed to listen?" I didn't answer with smiles or open arms, but I didn't send them away either. Because my daughter had just been born. A quiet, wide-eyed baby named Nora who gripped my finger like she'd never let go. And I wanted her to know truth, not revision. I wanted her to understand that grace didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing not to live shackled to bitterness. One Sunday, after a long day at the greenhouse, we all sat around the picnic table behind the house. Alex rocked Nora in the crook of his arm, gently bouncing her as she fought sleep. My mother sipped iced tea in silence, eyes fixed on the rows of kale. Then, without looking at me, she said quietly, "We saw your strength as a reason to let go when it should have been the reason we held on tighter." The words landed like soft thunder. I didn't reply, not out of coldness, out of exhaustion from all the words I'd spent trying to be seen. But I looked at her, and I let the silence speak for me. She met my gaze, and for the first time in years I saw her eyes, not shielded by sunglasses or denial, but full of something I hadn't seen since childhood. Regret. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and Nora finally dozed off, my father walked beside me to the compost bins, carrying the scraps like it was the most important job in the world. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, "but I'd like the chance to be useful, even just as a grandfather." I nodded once. "That's up to her." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll wait." It wasn't neat. It wasn't tied in a bow, but it was something, and maybe that was enough. Alex asked me that night after everyone had left, "Are you okay with them being around?" I thought about it. About all the nights I cried into a pillow that smelled like dust and disappointment. About the way I used to imagine success as revenge. About how Nora's fingers curled instinctively toward warmth. I don't want them to rewrite the past, I said. But I want her to know where she came from and how far we came to make this life. He nodded, brushing a lock of hair from my face. She'll know, because she would. I'd tell her stories not of spite or abandonment, but of grit, of a mother who built something from scraps, of a family that came undone and slowly, awkwardly tried to stitch itself back together. And when she was old enough, I'd tell her the truth. That forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing to remember and still plant something anyway. Years pass like seasons in the garden, marked by harvests, first steps, late frosts, and small triumphs tucked into ordinary days. Nora grew up with soil under her fingernails and stories in her ears. She could name 20 herbs before she turned 6, and once gave a speech in her first-grade class titled, "How My Mom Saved a Plant and Then a Whole Life." I cried in the back of the classroom the entire time. Jessica's Greens wasn't just a garden anymore. It was a movement. We expanded into a full-scale micro-farm. We launched eco-kits for schools, created mentorship programs for women in transition, and started workshops for single mothers trying to make something grow in borrowed backyards. But the thing I'm proudest of, our scholarship fund, it's not huge. We don't have millions. But each year we pick 2 students, bright, overlooked, persistent. The kind who get left out just like I did. We help them pay for college. No strings. No speeches about being strong enough to figure it out. Just support. The kind I once begged for in silence. The day we announced our 5th round of recipients, the local paper ran a story about us. Nothing flashy. Just a photo of me in overalls, holding a tray of seedlings, smiling like I'd finally come home. My parents cut it out and framed it. They now volunteer every fall at our harvest festival, setting up chairs and handing out cider. My father still struggles with words, but his pride speaks loudest in the way he shows up early and stays late. Emily teaches 2nd grade now. She brings her students to our farm once a year and lets them dig their fingers into the dirt like it's sacred. Sometimes, after the kids leave, she stays behind. We sit on the porch swing, watching Nora chase butterflies between the rows. She always says the same thing. "You built all this from nothing." And every time I smile and correct her. No, I built it from being underestimated. Because that's the truth. What they took from me, the college fund, the safety net, the belief, I turned into fuel. Not fire, growth. My life didn't roar back in vengeance. It bloomed. And standing here now, watching my daughter carry a watering can half her size toward the greenhouse, I know something deep in my bones. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers through the leaves, climbs trellises, and spreads beneath the soil until it becomes undeniable. Sometimes it grows. And if you're still watching, still listening, I hope you believe this too. You don't need permission to rise. You don't need applause to start. You can build beauty from betrayal. You can find family in the people who choose you. And you can become everything they said you'd never be. Just plant the first seed. And don't stop growing. If Jessica's journey moved you, tell me, what part hit you the hardest? Was it the betrayal, the rebuilding, or the quiet revenge? And where are you watching from? Let's grow this community, one story at a time.